6, my family had a tank of exotic fish. And one day I looked at these fish and I thought, oh, they're so scaly. They must have such dry skin. I should help them. And so I did. I filled the tank with lotion. I was in so much trouble that day. If I had known how much trouble, I would have left those poor fish alone. That was the first time of so many times in my life that I wished I had a crystal ball. A real crystal ball that I could look into and see the future, so that I'd know what decision to make, what to do. Now I'm an adult, I'm a parent, and I still struggle with decisions. Last year, my daughter Freya was born, and she gained weight so slowly, she fell right off the growth charts. I was terrified. They called it failure to thrive. She's 2 months old, she's already failing at life. It was horrible. I mean, I laugh about it now, but at the time, I cried every day. I took her to the cardiologist and the urologist and all the other ologists. And if I had just known that she'd grow up into a beautiful, a perfectly healthy toddler all by herself, I could have spared us the jabs, the pokes, the constant worry. Having a crystal ball means not having to live with uncertainty or regret. Now I know what you're thinking. Yeah, a crystal ball sounds awesome. I hope Nidhi's handing them out later. No. Unfortunately, we have to live with uncertainty and not knowing what's next. Crystal balls just don't exist. And so it can be really hard to make good decisions. And it's even harder to make decisions with someone else when you don't agree on your assumptions or your beliefs or a prediction of the future. When my husband Dave and I lived in New York, I started learning to play the piano on a digital piano that we'd received as a gift. I loved it. I played for hours every day. And after a couple of months, I said to Dave, I really need a real piano to learn right. I need an instrument with wood and strings and hammers instead of buttons and headphones and plugs. And Dave said, but Nidhi, you just started playing. Pianos are big and expensive, and we don't have the space. And you know, you have that tendency to start a hobby, buy all the fancy gear, and then drop it. I mean, look at your dusty rock climbing shoes, your unopened paintbrushes. You shouldn't buy a piano yet. And of course, I countered. I said, I'm committed. This is different. Look at how dedicated I've been since we started. I love that. I want a piano. And we tried so hard for the next several weeks to convince the other person that our prediction was right, that we knew what was next. And they didn't. But without that crystal ball, we were stuck in a stalemate. I remember so many nights, one of us would end up sleeping in the living room, which is where the piano should have been. I was frustrated, and I shared the story with a friend of mine. And she said, you know, Nidhi, but isn't this kind of your job? Isn't solving problems under uncertainty what you do for a living? And I had this moment, this ding! I was like, oh my God, you're right. And I went home, and that night I said to Dave, we're looking at this problem all wrong. We've been looking at it through a narrow lens of prediction, but we can't predict the future. We don't know who's right, and what if we're both wrong? Anything's possible. And so we agreed to park to the side our very certain assumptions and to accept uncertainty. Then we started thinking. We said, okay, let's look at this problem through a wide lens of possibility. What are all the things that could happen? What are all the things we could do? And then we landed on a solution. We bought a small, cheap, popular piano that has good resale value. This lets me play on a real piano without breaking the bank or the living room. And it's such a simple solution, but we couldn't see it through that narrow lens of prediction because it's not the best thing to do if Dave's right, and because then I shouldn't be buying a piano at all. And it's not the best thing to do if my prediction is right, because then I should buy a really good one. But buying a cheap piano works well regardless of who's right. It's so obvious. We just didn't see it at first. Now, I hear the skeptics in the audience. I hear you thinking, okay, Nidhi, you found a compromise. Big deal. But it's not a compromise. See, a compromise, you've heard that saying, a good compromise leaves everyone angry. That's because a compromise is about giving up or giving in, leaving so much of your position, just so you can make a decision and move on. And so often, a compromise doesn't even work. I mean, what good would half a piano be? That doesn't work for anybody. So what is it that I do that helped me solve Pianogate, as I like to call it now? Well, I'm a decision scientist. I work on finding solutions to problems that work for all sides, for all predictions and beliefs. Solutions that work even when we don't have that crystal ball. And we call these solutions robust. And a robust solution leaves everyone satisfied. What is a robust solution? It's a solution that works even when we don't agree and even when we don't know what will be. And it's a solution that comes from moving away from that narrow lens of prediction to the wide lens of possibility. And I have good news for you. You make robust decisions. Raise your hand if you drove here today. And keep your hand raised if you wore a seatbelt. Great, that was a robust decision. You couldn't predict if you were going to be in a crash driving here today, but you buckled up anyway, because that makes sense, that works. You make other robust decisions when you do common sense things. You try to send your kids to college because you believe that it opens up opportunities for them. You save for retirement, even though maybe you and your spouse don't agree on where you're going to retire or how much money you'll need. You teach your kids to be thoughtful, hardworking, fair people because you want them to be resilient to everything that life might throw their way. But this common sense, this intuition, it's not enough when we're faced with high-stakes problems where beliefs are polarized and the future is deeply uncertain. My job is to help people make robust decisions intentionally, and not just to solve personal problems, but to solve global problems. I believe robust decisions are the key to solving some of the most difficult problems we face, that we struggle to make any progress on because we don't have that crystal ball. I work on finding ways to deal with climate change, robust ways to deal with our changing climate. Now, let me tell you a little bit about climate change. The Earth's climate has changed over its history, but in planetary time, that change is happening like that. If you were going to go on a desert safari, let's say next year, to the Sahara, you would prepare. You would buy a map, you'd get a guide, you'd buy fancy gear, which I approve of, definitely get the fancy gear. But now imagine that when you leave today, you're suddenly teleported to the Sahara with just what's on your back, your tank tops and your flip-flops. You'd never survive. And that's climate change. Change so fast that life on Earth struggles to adapt. And for me, climate change is the single most important problem we face in the world today because it threatens all life on Earth. It threatens my child and your child and the child of every living thing. And when I look up at the stars, I remember that as far as we know, we are the only life in the universe. This pale blue dot, the life on it is so rare, so precious. Climate change threatens all of that. So when my daughter grows up, I don't want her asking, "Mom, how come you didn't do everything to deal with climate change when you still had the chance?" And believe me, Freya is a curious kid. She is going to grill me. So I better have some good answers. One of the reasons we're not dealing with climate change is actually really simple to explain. We don't have that crystal ball. Our leaders tell us that until they can predict the future, until we know what the future climate will be, we can't make any progress on the problem. And climate scientists aren't sure how fast the climate is changing or how much it's going to change. And we don't all believe in the role of science anyway. We seem stuck in a stalemate between deniers and alarmists. But we don't have to be stuck. Now, here in LA, we're really worried about drought. It hardly rains here, just 6 inches last year. But now, let's teleport to Lima, Peru. Like LA, it's a city of 10 million people. But unlike LA, it hardly ever, it basically never rains in Lima. Last year, 0.3 inches. You don't carry an umbrella in LA. Well, in Lima, they don't even sell umbrellas. And the people in Lima are wondering, will there be enough water for our kids? Now, Lima gets its water from rivers that run from the Andes Mountains in the east to the Pacific Ocean in the west. And Lima's planners wanted to make sure that they'd bring enough water in the future. And so they did what water planners everywhere do. They made a prediction of future water supply and demand based on past trends. And then they made a plan based on those predictions. And their plan had 14 huge water projects. Things like tunnels under the Andes to bring water from the east to the west, new desalination plants, and new water treatment plants. And the price tag? $2.7 billion, far more than any plan they'd ever tried before. The problem is, climate scientists aren't sure what the future water in the Andes is going to be to feed those rivers. More rainfall, less rainfall? Sorry, no crystal ball. And to make matters worse, Lima's planners weren't sure what their future was going to be, and they didn't agree on their predictions or their assumptions. So they couldn't actually tell if this plan was going to work. And they can't afford to spend $2.7 billion on a plan that won't work, on a piano that they're not going to play. As part of a team with the World Bank, I was called in to help, to change them, to move them from that narrow lens of prediction to the wide lens of possibility. Instead of asking what's next, we asked, what if? What if climate change brings more rainfall? What if it brings less rainfall? What if it brings less rainfall, but when it rains, it pours? We asked other questions, lots of other questions. Like, what if their projects are hard and they can't actually do them all? What if they run out of money? What if their population grows really fast? What if, what if, what if? And with this process, we found some robust decisions. We found that of their 14 projects, there were 3 that made sense no matter what if. They could get started on these right away. And through the same process, we found 2 that didn't make sense no matter what if. They could chuck these out and save themselves $500 million. Everybody was happy that day. It was ceviche for everybody. And the rest, rather than asking should we do them or not, we created a flexible plan that shows them what to do and when to do it as conditions evolve. And we showed them that conservation has to be a key part of any implementation plan. Without this wide lens of possibility, they would be banking on having water for their kids based on a dicey set of predictions and a brittle and more expensive plan. With this robust and flexible plan, though, they're confident that they're prepared for the future, even though they still don't know what it'll be. Now, Lima's story is about adapting to climate change, living with climate change. But I can't leave here today without telling you the other half of the story, which is that we have to mitigate climate change. We have to stop it from getting worse to avoid that risk of catastrophe. And so let's use that wide lens of possibility. Let's ask those what-if questions to find robust ways to reduce our carbon footprint. Climate change is my life's purpose. It's why I get out of bed in the morning. That and my daughter's usually calling for me. But we face difficult decisions every day. You and I face difficult decisions. Buy a new house or continue renting. Stay at home with a new baby or go back to work. Find assisted living for an aging parent or help them live at home alone. These are difficult questions, and so often we try to answer them through that narrow lens of prediction. And we find ourselves stuck because we can't make predictions. Crystal balls don't exist. But you don't have to be stuck. And the key lies in that tiny 2-word question, what if? What if is such a powerful question because it strips away our assumptions. It opens our eyes to the universe of possible things that could be and the multitude of actions we could take. What if is the key to looking through that wide lens of possibility and finding robust solutions. So the next time you're faced with a difficult decision, don't ask, what's next? Ask, what if? Thank you.